Lesson 6. The Women's March on Versailles. The Women's March on Versailles, also known as the October March, was a significant event during the French Revolution that took place on October 5, 1789. It was a protest led by thousands of women from Paris who marched to the Palace of Versailles to demand bread and to confront King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. The march was sparked by widespread food shortages and rising bread prices in Paris, which led to growing discontent and anger among the population. The women who participated in the march were primarily working class and lower class individuals who were suffering the most from the economic hardships. The march began when a group of women gathered in Paris and marched to the Hotel de Ville, the city hall, to demand action from the local authorities. They were joined by a larger crowd, and together they made their way to Versailles, which was the residence of the royal family. Upon reaching Versailles, the crowd confronted the king and queen, demanding that they address the food shortages and improve the living conditions of the people. The protesters were particularly angry at Marie Antoinette, whom they blamed for their suffering and accused of being indifferent to their plight while she hoarded all the grain and threw indulgent parties. The king and queen eventually agreed to meet with the representatives of the crowd and to listen to their grievances. Negotiations took place, brokered by the commander of the guard, the Marquess de Lafayette, and the royal family eventually agreed to return to Paris with the protesters. The march back to Paris was peaceful, with the royal family and the crowd travelling together. The Women's March from Versailles had significant consequences. It demonstrated the power of popular protests and the ability of the people to challenge and influence the monarchy. The march also led to the relocation of the royal family from Versailles to Paris, where they would be under closer scrutiny and subject to the influence of the revolutionaries. March events. A timeline of the events leading up to and during the Women's March from Versailles. October 1st, 1789. The king held his traditional banquet for the celebration of the arrival of the new garrison, despite bread queues in Paris being several miles long. October 5th, 1789. Morning. A group of women in Paris, frustrated by food shortages and high bread prices, gathered at the Hotel de Ville to protest. They were joined by a larger crowd of men and women, and together they marched to the Palais Royal, where they demanded action from the government. October 5th, 1789, afternoon. The crowd, now numbering in the thousands, continued their protests and marched to the Hotel de Ville to demand bread. They were met by the mayor of Paris, who promised to address their concerns. The crowd, still unsatisfied with the government's response, decided to march to Versailles, where King Louis XVI and the National Assembly were located. The march was led by the women, who were joined by men along the way. October 5th to 6th, 1789. The marchers arrived at Versailles at 5 p.m. and surrounded the palace. They demanded to see the king and called for the royal family to return to Paris. The crowd were initially met with resistance from the palace guards, but eventually negotiations took place between the leaders of the march and the king. October 6th, 1789. King Louis XVI, after a restless night and the invasion of the palace, agreed to the demands of the crowd, including the distribution of bread and the relocation of the royal family to Paris. The king and his family left Versailles and travelled to Paris accompanied by the crowd. October 6th to 7th, 1789. The royal family, along with the crowd, arrived in Paris, stopping at the Hotel de Ville to listen to speeches before being escorted to and settled into the Tuileries Palace. The march and the events surrounding it marked a significant turning point in the French Revolution, as it demonstrated the power of popular protest and the influence of women in shaping political events. The Palace of Versailles. The Palace of Versailles, known as the Château de Versailles in French, is a grand palace located in Versailles, a suburb of Paris, France. The palace was originally a hunting lodge, built by Louis XIII in 1624. However, it was transformed into a magnificent palace by Louis XIV, also known as the Sun King. It served as the principal residence of the French kings and queens until the French Revolution in 1789. The Palace of Versailles is renowned for its opulent and extravagant architecture. It features a combination of Baroque and classical styles with a grand facades, ornate decorations and extensive gardens. The palace is organised around a central courtyard and consists of multiple wings, including the King's Grand Apartment, the Queen's Grand Apartment and the Hall of Mirrors. One of the most famous and iconic features of the palace is the Hall of Mirrors. This grand gallery stretches over 70 metres and is lined with 17 mirrored arches on one side, facing windows on the other. The hall was designed to showcase the power and wealth of the French monarchy and has been the setting for numerous significant historical events. The Palace of Versailles is surrounded by vast, meticulously manicured gardens covering an area of approximately 800 hectares. The gardens feature geometrically designed flower beds, fountains, sculptures and ornamental lakes. They were designed to complement the grandeur of the palace and provide a picturesque backdrop for the royal ceremonies and leisure activities. The palace is also significant for its role in history beyond its architectural and artistic splendour. The Treaty of Versailles, which officially ended World War I in 1919, was signed in the Hall of Mirrors. The treaty imposed severe conditions on Germany and laid the groundwork for subsequent geopolitical landscape of the 20th century. Today, the Palace of Versailles is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most visited tourist attractions in France. It houses a museum dedicated to the history of France and showcases a vast collection of art, furniture and historical artefacts. The palace and its gardens continue to be symbols of French grandeur and serve as a testament to the country's rich cultural heritage. Versailles de Méricourt. Versailles de Méricourt, whose real name was Anne Joseph Versailles, was a prominent figure during the French Revolution as a participant in the Women's March on Versailles. She was born on August 13, 1762, in Marcourt, Belgium, and died on June 9, 1817, in Paris, France. Versailles de Méricourt was known for her involvement in revolutionary activities and her advocacy for women's rights. She was a charismatic and influential figure, often appearing in public dressed in blood red or white and sporting a tricolour cockade and carrying a sword. During the Women's March on Versailles in 1789, Versailles de Méricourt played a significant role in leading the protests. She was one of the key figures who addressed the crowd and demanded that King Louis XVI address their grievances. Her passionate speeches and leadership helped galvanise the protesters and put pressure on the monarchy. After the march, Versailles de Méricourt continued to be involved in the revolutionary activities. However, her political career was marked by personal and mental health struggles. She was subjected to violence and abuse which had a severe impact on her mental well-being. Versailles de Méricourt's life serves as a reminder of the challenges faced by women during the French Revolution and their efforts to fight for equality and social change. Despite her personal difficulties, she remains an important figure in the history of the revolution and the struggles for women's rights.